Welcome in, Dween Nation. We are the Dween Sports Podcast, and we are just about to get started. But before we do, we'd love if you could like, comment, subscribe, and share so we can continue to be your fantasy sports podcast. Thanks for being part of Dween Nation, and enjoy the show. Welcome in, Dween Nation. This is your host, Justin Pies, alongside Genoa Agudelo. And today's a special day because now we are getting into the August territory. Drafts are starting to happen, the earlier drafts. And we want to talk about quarterback rankings. We're going to go through quarterbacks, running backs, tight ends, and wide receivers in a different episode. But this is the top 10 quarterbacks to have in your half PPR fantasy football leagues. So this doesn't necessarily mean they are the best quarterbacks in the NFL, because then you could argue Mahomes is going to be at the top. This is fantasy football strictly, but of course you probably know that by watching this podcast. But really excited to dive into it. I have my top 10 listed. Genoa has his top 10 listed, so we're going to discuss it all the way through, maybe some honorable mentions, why we have guys lower or higher. Super excited to talk about it. Before we do, how you doing, Genoa?
Yo, Dween Nation. I just want to be the first to celebrate and say happy draft season to everybody across the nation there, that everybody that participates in fantasy football. This is like, Justin, it's like Christmas before Christmas, right? It's like, it's just that draft season. In the holiday season, Justin, it's like Thanksgiving, and it's like Black Friday, and then it's like those 3.5 weeks where you got all these Christmas parties and stuff. That's what's going to be like for the next month, Justin. We got all these draft festivities that will be kicking off this weekend all across the nation, Justin. I think a lot of teams are going to be drafted this weekend, and it's just so exciting. I'm very excited. I'm so pumped. And it couldn't have been better to do a better person with you, Justin. Not to mention, you started off with QBs, Justin. I know we draft RBs and wide receivers in the first round, but these are the aces there. These are the ace of aces, and this is how that leads you to your fantasy championships. And I cannot be honored to be doing this episode, man. I'm so excited for 2025 in this season.
Yeah, man. I'm so excited to discuss our quarterback secrets, our quarterback buys and sells and sleepers and breakouts and all of the above. And also, Dween Nation, we're going to have our rankings episodes, but also in the next coming weeks, we are going to have sleepers episodes. Breakout episodes are My Guys, which is our famous episode. So stay tuned for all of that. But yeah, really, let's dive into the quarterbacks, because, hey, when you prep for draft day, arguably, we probably all agree here, draft day is the biggest day of the year. It's probably the most anticipated day of the year, even over the season, even over week one, which is, obviously the thrill of waiting 8 months to see another football game that matters. But draft day is just super exciting. So we're here to help you, and we're going to start with what we have at our quarterback ones, and it is Josh Allen. I have Josh Allen as my quarterback one for this fantasy season, and him and Lamar, very close. I don't bat an eye if you want to go Lamar first, but the big changes here is Josh Allen adds Elijah Moore, Josh Palmer. You add Kincaid coming back from injury. Last year was plagued with injury, and then you got Keon Coleman coming into year two. I think that's going to boost Josh Allen just a little bit over Lamar. And the other thing, James Cook, a phenomenal running back, that he is. He had a great season last year. 16 rushing touchdowns in 2024. He's not that kind of back to be a big workhorse, high-volume touchdown back. So I think some of those touchdowns, they just go back to Josh Allen. So give me Josh Allen as my QB1.
Yeah, Justin, definitely have to agree with you there. Josh Allen had 2 weeks last year where he went over like 50. He went bananas. I want to say it was that game against Detroit and then that game at home against the Rams.
Yep.
He had 2 phenomenal games, Justin. Not to mention, this was his first season without Stephon Diggs, and it was very impressive. And now going into this year, I think Keon Coleman is going to have a better year than his rookie season. I love Joshua Palmer. I think he was really good when needed last year with the Chargers. And Khalil Shakur is going to be a really like Edelman-esque, right? Like Edelman wasn't always 1,200, 1,500 yards, 10 touchdowns. But when Tom Brady needed him, he had some good games for them in his years with New England. Even after Gronkowski left in 2019, I think Edelman was still pretty good. And then Dalton Kincaid, it's time for him to get have this breakout year. We thought he was going to be Laporta a few years ago, Justin, and it just never happened. And then an interesting, I wouldn't say deep sleeper because I don't think anybody's going to draft this guy, but a guy that you can put in DraftKings lineups for the cheap is Laviska Shenault. I don't know if you remember him about 4 or 5 years ago out of Colorado. Everybody was real high on Laviska Shenault. Maybe he can make, a breakout. That's like a DraftKings. And then you got Dawson Knox, who maybe you can find in the red zone. So Josh Allen has a really good supporting cast. Not to mention he loves to dump off passes to his running backs and then his rushing ability, Justin. No matter who his wide receivers are, Justin, I think he's most definitely a lock to once again repeat at QB1. But we have another quarterback that we're going to talk about here in just a second that will challenge him for that title.
And I completely agree with everything you said. You even added on top of what I had missed, so I love that. Shakir being there, Knox being there. But this guy on his tail, obviously Lamar Jackson is our number 2 quarterback in fantasy football this year, and he missed out on the MVP. He missed out on he lost to Josh Allen. So this could be a somewhat of a revenge tour, even though he had a phenomenal 2024 season. I think Lamar Jackson is in store for another great year. He was by far the most consistent quarterback in fantasy football last year. So if you're looking for high upside but more consistency, Lamar could be the pick. But where I put Josh Allen over Lamar is for one kind of big reason. I expect the defense for the Baltimore Ravens to be much improved in 2025. And with that, they're going to have leads earlier and often. They're not going to have to throw the ball as much as Lamar had to do, which was his best passing output in his career. This year, I think they're going to be in a lot more leads, and they're just going to want to milk the clock with their big bell cow back in Derrick Henry. That's kind of the only thing. It's nitpicking, but that's why I have Lamar at 2.
Well, Justin, here's the thing. Last year, Lamar Jackson had 4,000 passing yards, and he was only about 60, 70 yards away from 1,000 rushing yards. And not to mention, he was able to do that with Derrick Henry. In my opinion, he's one of the best running backs in our generation since Adrian Peterson, and maybe you can want to throw in Saquon Barkley. Derrick Henry, you got to, from high school, college, just his collegiate career, Heisman, national champion. Lamar was able to do that with a Derrick Henry in the backfield there, Justin. And look at his supporting cast, right? Zay Flowers, I think, is going to have a great year. He had 1,000 yards last year. Rashad Bateman was fantastic last year. He caught a ton of deep balls for touchdowns. And then you get old man Hopkins, who I think he can flourish in this offense. I think he can have a bounce back year. I still believe in Mark Andrews. I like Tylan Wallace and Devontae Walker to be kind of those guys that have, some key plays for Lamar. And not to mention, he has a better running game than, in his own ability than Josh Allen does, Justin. You might consider him the greatest rushing quarterback of all time, exceeding Michael Vick and Josh Allen, and maybe Russell Wilson in his prime as well. So I just love this supporting cast. I know there was some news today that Isaiah Likely is probably going to miss some time. He might play week 1 as what I'm looking at. But still, this supporting cast is phenomenal. We didn't believe in it last year, Justin, but this year it looks much, much better. This offense is, to me, poised to actually head to San Francisco for the Super Bowl this year, in my opinion. And I think Lamar Jackson's going to have a phenomenal year. Give me, again, another 4,000-yard passing year. And this year, he will hit 1,000 yards rushing. And I just love what he was able to do last year. But, Justin, one last thing. Look at his schedule real quick. He starts week 1 at Buffalo. Week 2, home with Cleveland. Week 3, a Monday Night Football matchup with the Detroit Lions, the number 1 seed of last year. Week 4, at Kansas City. Week 5, with my Texans. Week 6, with the Rams. What am I getting out here, Justin? A ton of shootout potentials. First 6 matchups, the first 5 out of the 6 matchups are against teams that all made the playoffs last year. Not to mention, he does get a Chicago along the way that we think are going to be good. He gets Cincinnati twice. He gets Green Bay in championship week there, Justin. So Lamar Jackson, to me, we have Josh Allen number 1, and he is the consensus because he won MVP and he had those great weeks last year. But you got to remember, if it wasn't for those 2 big weeks for Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson would have actually had the MVP.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And a lot of people think that Lamar still should have won the MVP based on his stat lines, how consistent he was, how dominant that offense was. And he became super efficient as a passer, which hadn't been kind of his story throughout his career thus far. But he became really good in that facet of his game. And then, of course, the rushing. He is the greatest rushing quarterback of all time. He's past Michael Vick. He's by far, and I think he's going to continue that production this year. And that's what we were talking about earlier. If you decide Lamar is your guy instead of Josh Allen, by all means, go ahead and do that, because we're nitpicking at the top because they are by far the best 2 quarterbacks. And then I think we move to quarterback 3 here, which I think is probably in a tier of his own, maybe with a guy we're talking about next. But Jalen Hurts finds himself in the next tier at quarterback 3. I love Jalen Hurts. I think that he's set up for, he's got the same offense. The only thing that changes is the OC. Kellen Moore is now in New Orleans, and Kevin Patullo is the new offensive coordinator. And the only thing that you need to know about Patullo that really is going to change maybe some schemes of the offense is he likes to throw the ball more. And in this offense, Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles were dead last, 32nd in pass percentage So they were a rush first team and a rush first team and a rush first team. They loved running the football. When you have Saquon Barkley, you have the tush push ability, and you have the best offensive line in football. Why not? But I think this year might be a little bit different, and it's only going to help Jalen Hurts when you have A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. You still have Dallas Goedert around. Jahan Dotson is obviously the wide receiver 3, and he's solid. And then you got Saquon in the backfield. So I don't think there's really any doubts I have for Jalen Hurts. I guess you could argue maybe a Super Bowl hangover. Maybe he's hanging out, but he just doesn't seem like that guy either. He's the most calm guy in sports, a guy who is, no BS, always on top of his game. So I expect big year for Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, Justin, honestly, I think Super Bowl hangovers are really for the teams that lose the Super Bowl. But Jalen Hurts did not take a step back, and this year's Super Bowl was phenomenal. I was actually watching some highlights and thinking about it today. That deep ball, I want to say it was the third quarter, that touchdown to Devonta Smith, which is oh so beautiful and oh so sweet for all Philadelphia Eagles fans to see. But now going into this year, Justin, I really love Jalen Hurts. He is the consensus for sure, number 3. You got to remember the tush push. A lot of defenses are going to be frightened by Saquon Barkley, and, it kind of the same thing as last year. They're going to be frightened with the tush push, so it's really either way. I mean, pick your poison if you're facing this Eagles offense. And A.J. Brown is going to have a phenomenal year, not to mention so is Devonta Smith. We love our guy Johnny Wilson from last year. We were talking about pre-draft in 2024. And then Jahan Dotson, last year they traded for him with a divisional rival. We all know Sub-Zero and Anais Smith. Maybe he can have a season there for the Eagles. He can have some say in that offense. Dallas Goedert. And maybe, Justin, they can use Will Shipley there out of the backfield to get some dump-off passes there. I like what I saw to Will Shipley in the little plays that, I know obviously Saquon dominate. And another thing, Justin, Saquon's receiving touchdowns is what's going to help Jalen Hurts. Saquon is a phenomenal receiving back. And I feel like that's what's going to help Jalen Hurts this year. One thing I want to mention there, a lot of people talk about Jalen Hurts' passing yards there, Justin. He did barely hit, not even 3,000 yards passing. But I want to tell you something here, Justin. I want to show you something. He had 28 fantasy points in the semifinals week, only throwing 108 passing yards. And then I want to say, before the semifinals week, he had 28. And then semifinals week 15, he did have 290 and 32 fantasy points. So he it's on and off. Yes, he might not have 200 passing yards, but Justin, he can get you 2 rushing touchdowns and a passing touchdown. Not to mention, with his rushing yards, he'll get about 50 or 60. And yes, he might throw for 170, but those 3 total touchdowns and 60 rushing was all going to add up. He's really good about not turning over the ball there, Justin. So that's why we love Jalen Hurts. I mean, he can throw you 300 yards. He can have a banana games passing like he did in the Super Bowl, or he can barely get you 150 passing yards, but he'll still have 2 tush-push touchdowns. 1 passing touchdown. And for me, that's really good as being, your QB1 in fantasy.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think I will play a little devil's advocate here just a little bit in the fact that if you're comparing him to guys like Lamar and Josh Allen, I don't think he has that same potential to put up 50 points in a game. He's very consistent, will get you 20 to 30, which you're happy with. Because to me, he's more consistent than even Josh Allen. But Josh Allen has those spike weeks that win you your week, with just on the back of Josh Allen. And then kind of similar to what Lamar did that you're talking about with his schedule. Jalen Hurts' schedule is something else. 11 of his 18 games are against playoff teams from last year. So he's got some battles. And then 4 more of those games are division opponents. He's got a bunch of competitive games this season. I think we're both on board with Jalen Hurts. Let's talk about this next guy who is part of one of the worst defenses, but probably the best offense. And Joe Burrow. I love him this year. I'll throw it to you on this one. What do you have for him this year?
Justin, I absolutely love Joe Burrow this year. It's going to be the same script as last year for these Cincinnati Bengals. There's a lot of turmoil in the offseason with this defense. We know our guy in Shamar Turner, right? Or is it Stewart. Okay, I know. Shamar Stewart, he barely got his contract signed this past week, but it was a whole summer of not him, participating in any of the offseason festivities. And then Trey Hendrickson there. I think Trey Hendrickson, he might not be able to play. So this defense is probably not going to be good. So with Joe Burrow, he's going to be throwing all along. Not to mention, he's got Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Chase Brown. I love me Sir Jermaine Burton out of the University of Alabama. And I also like me some Andre Ioshivas, who had a lot of flashes this year. I really hope that Mike Gesicki can kind of get more involved. I mean, he was so on and off there last year, Justin. He had a good game, and then he had a couple goose eggs, and then kind of like what it was in Miami. I know if he gets utilized and gets the targets, he will be a top 10 tight end in fantasy this year. And Chase Brown is a fantastic receiving back there, Justin. I just love it. You're in a division where you're going to have to throw a ton, right? You get the Browns twice, and Joe Burrow's going to have to prove that he can go to Cleveland and beat these Browns because he has struggled a lot against these Browns. You're going to have to play Baltimore twice. And I just love Chase Brown there, receiving out of the backfield. I just feel like Jamar Chase is primed for a good year. T. Higgins is primed for a good year. And even when T. Higgins misses, I feel like there's other players that Joe Burrow just finds, like a Yoshi Vaz. I'm looking at a Charlie Jones here, who is a deep sleeper. And I do see that they brought back Samaje Perine, who was a part of that Super Bowl run that they went against in the Rams in the Super Bowl. And I just feel like they're going to be in a ton of passing situations. And not to mention, one last thing, I want people to understand that Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase are on a all-time connection that we've never seen. You got to remember, these two won a national championship in college. I watched some highlights of that game. I think Jamar went for 2 tutties in that national championship game. Literally the first year they got together in the NFL, went to the Super Bowl, and ever since then, Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow, possibly, if not, might be the best connection, QB to wide receiver in the NFL, Justin. They've been doing it since 2019. They've been consistent, and that is something that I'm so excited. That's like my top 5 things that I'm excited to watch this year in the NFL. The best connection in football, Joe Burrow to Jamar Chase. I mean, it's going to be money. I can't wait, and that's why, Justin, he's going to be he's the number 4 quarterback in our list because he's going to be in a ton of shootouts with that defense being bad. That division is tight. They're going to see the Chiefs. They're going to want to prove that they are the only team really really in the AFC that can beat the Chiefs. So that's why I think Joe Burrow is going to be lights out this year.
Yeah, everything you said, I completely agree with. How bad this defense is going to be is only going to propel this offense to do more. We saw it last year. You're right. The blueprint is the same heading into 2025. The only good thing is now all the wide receivers are happy and paid and maybe happy to finally play for their organization, the team that decided to invest in them more. I think that's only going to help guys like T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. Higgins the last 2 years was getting a franchise tag, talking extensions. It didn't happen. Cincinnati is very known to play hardball with their players, but they pay those 2 guys. Now the defense, they decided not to do that. Obviously, you're right. They did sign Shamar Stewart to his rookie contract this past week. But Hendrickson's still not there. I do expect Hendrickson to be on the field to get his deal done before the season starts. And I only think that helps the morale of the team because obviously you talk about all these good players, but it's also about chemistry, morale, and momentum. And that kind of transitions me into another thing. The Bengals, since Joe Burrow's been there, has been known to start really slow. Last year, obviously, the awful loss to the Patriots, the really bad Patriots with Gerard Mayo in week 1. They always start slow, either by, Burrow coming into the year injured or somebody coming into the year injured or just them starting slow. But I think this year they start their season at Cleveland and then they host Jacksonville. Those are not super scary opponents for your first 2 weeks. Obviously, there's a possibility they do start slow, but I think the NFL is giving them a break here, giving them 2 opponents that I think they can capitalize on and start quickly, at least more quickly than they have in the past. So we do like Joe Burrow here at quarterback 4. And Dween Nation, you're probably surprised to see this. We have been aligned thus far through our predictions or through our rankings here, but it does change here at quarterback 5, where I have Jaden Daniels at 5. Genoa has Patrick Mahomes. I'll start here why I have Jaden Daniels at 5. And I will put a contingency here. If Terry McLaurin continues to miss time with his contract holdout, things will change with this prediction. But right now, what we saw from Jaden Daniels last year, how he was able to just step into a rookie offense with Cliff Kingsbury and be a top quarterback in this league, make the NFC championship game. I think that what changes this year is they upgrade the offensive line. They bring in Laramie Tunsil. I know he had a somewhat subpar year for the Texans last year, but he's still an all-pro guy. You draft Josh Connerly in the first round. You bring in Deebo Samuel. I know you lost Diami Brown, but I just think there's still improvements all around for Daniels, and I think maybe stepping into year 2, he should improve as well. Now, obviously, there's the doubts of, we saw C.J. Stroud have a massively good rookie season. Then next year, it wasn't as good, and maybe there's a sophomore slump incoming for Jaden Daniels. He's not my favorite quarterback to grab in drafts just because he's going as high as those top 3 guys, and I wouldn't invest in that pick over those 3 guys. So normally I'm not getting Jaden Daniels, but I don't want to deter you if he drops well enough in your drafts to pick him up.
Yeah, Justin, I'm going to agree there. I'm going to say this with Jaden Daniels. Do be aware of a sophomore slump. But you are in a Cliff Kingsbury offense, and that's an offense that's able to produce as long as he's an OC, an offensive coordinator. I do think that their offense works smoothly, without him being a head coach of the whole team. Now, look, if Terry McLaurin does miss, I don't think he misses much. Not to mention, you look at his schedule. They play the Giants week 1 at home. Week 2 is on bust alert because they're at Green Bay on a Thursday night. Just, I hate my Thursday night games if I have a quarterback. But then week 3, they go to Vegas, and then week 4, it's at Atlanta. I think by then, Terry McLaurin will be back. Hopefully we can trust the guy in Debo. He does have old man Noah Brown. I do love me some Luke McCaffrey. I still remember what he did against my U of H Cougars a few years ago when he was at the University of Rice, or Rice University. And then they have Michael Gallup. I don't know if you remember Michael Gallup. They have a new guy, Jalen Lane, and KJ Osborne, who's third on that depth chart. And then Austin Eckler could be a really good receiving back. Not to mention, Dayton Daniels has a top 5 rushing ability in the NFL. So maybe for the first couple weeks, if Terry McLaurin were to miss, he has a great rushing ability. Not to mention, he has a security blanket in Zach Ertz, who in my opinion is a future Hall of Famer. And even John Bates, I want to say he's out of Boise State. Wasn't that bad. A couple years ago. And Ben Sinnott out of Kansas State, who they drafted a year ago. So maybe those guys can be some security blankets along the way. I mean, I don't know, Justin. Do you think he can kind of keep his QB1 status there? I mean, do you think it's a CJ Stroud repeat?
I think the biggest thing that'll differentiate him and CJ Stroud is what you mentioned a few seconds ago, and is that his rushing ability is top 5 in the league, where CJ is not known for rushing, does not get many yards on the ground, where Jaden Daniels could save you with his ground game. You know how valuable rushing quarterbacks are in fantasy football. His passing might not be there as much as it was last year, and I actually do expect it to take a bit of a downgrade, but I do think his rushing ability will keep him afloat, where I think quarterback 5 is solid, but I do think he is capped at his ceiling. I don't think he's a top 3 guy. I don't think he'll end there. And I think he could finish as low as quarterback 10, but I can't see him falling outside the top 10.
Fair enough. For me, I guess I'll go right into why I have Patrick Mahomes, Justin. One thing I do want to mention is that there was 2 injuries today reported out with his wideouts. Xavier Worthy could be being evaluated for a concussion, which he should be fine by week 1. However, Hollywood Brown there, Justin, he suffered an ankle injury today, but Andy Reid said that he should be fine. We still have a month and some change for the season to begin. So I'm not stressing that for Patrick Mahomes. Looking at his depth chart here, we know that Rashee Rice is going to be on potential suspicion. I think it's week. I don't know if they officially announced how many weeks, but he will be suspended. They do still have Juju Smith-Schuster, so maybe Juju Smith can have a kind of 2021 type of year that he did in one of his last few years when he was with the Steelers. And they have some new guys there. I mean, Jalen Royals is there. They got Tyquan Thornton. And they do still have Sky Moore, who I remember many, many years ago, he was a top wide receiver prospect in the 2nd and 3rd round. So maybe they can kind of use him. In this Andy Reid offense, there's always someone new, Justin, that's balling out, right? Andy Reid is, if not one of the best offensive minds we've ever seen in the history of this league. And then Travis Kelce, this could be his potential last year. And so he might be riding off to the sunset. He might be thinking about marriage and his off the field plans there with one Taylor Swift. And I feel like Noah Gray is another red zone guy for Patrick Mahomes. And Patrick Mahomes is also a pretty good, decent, to help Mahomes get near 300 yards, as well as Hollywood Brown. They're going to have someone new there. I know for a fact they're going to have someone different. If I had to pick, I'm going to say it might be Jalen Royals there. He was a 4th round pick out of Utah State. And so I think that Andy Reid is already in his office scheming up plays. And so I feel like Patrick Mahomes, it's kind of like Tom Brady in his New England Patriot days. They won their 3 Super Bowls at 2008, 9 years. I know he tore his ACL after the 2007 year. But I feel like in those 10 years before Brady won his 4th, he was still a top QB. He was still putting up 30-something touchdowns a year, not turning over the ball more than 10 times a season, still getting you 3,000, 4,000 yards. He had that one year where he had Gronk and Hernandez and Wes Welker and Brandon Lloyd and Deion Brown. I mean, I can go on and on and on. He had really fantastic supporting cast. This is kind of like where Patrick Mahomes is there, Justin. I feel like regardless of who's there this year, I think this year with the Super Bowl loss that stings over, Patrick Mahomes is going to have a better year than he has in his last 2 seasons where he ended up with the Lombardi Trophy.
Yeah, I completely agree that this year is going to be an upgrade of a season for him offensively. I just really hope that Andy Reid and that offensive play calling becomes a little bit more versatile, a little bit more down the field, a little bit more fast paced. And I think as you mentioned, those Super Bowl runs, they've had such a good defense where they didn't need Patrick Mahomes to go, Superman mode. And like they had to do the 2 years with or the years with Tyreek Hill and when they had a bad defense. I think that this year though is a change, and it's something that I think you can't calculate. It's something where they got embarrassed in the Super Bowl this year, and I think that Mahomes is coming in hungry, and that I think that really could change the mood of things, especially when you're on top of the mountain for so long. You get comfortable there, and I think they really did. That's kind of how I view the Chiefs, and I think that this year they really are going to look. They've looked internally, and I think they're going to change a lot. But I do think when you started your point, these wide receivers need to be healthy. We don't know about Rashee Rice, but I do expect him to miss a handful of games with the suspension. And then Xavier Worthy, this concussion news is unfortunate, but one that in a week or two he can recover from and be back by the time the season starts. They lost Justin Watson, who's not a big loss, to the Texans this offseason, and then Hollywood Brown, again, hurt. You're really hoping, they brought him in last year. He got hurt in week 1, missed the whole season. You were really hoping that he could put in some valuable snaps, but injuries can plague an entire football team for an entire season. I hope that doesn't happen with Kansas City, because I actually love watching Mahomes when he's absolutely dialing it up and being great on offense, unlike, last year where it was those close games that were low scoring and kind of ugly. I want old Patrick Mahomes. But maybe we'll see that. I hope we see that. And that's I have him at 7 overall. So for quarterbacks in my rankings. But I think that if he steps into a role like he did 3 years ago, 5 might be too low. I think that he is obviously he's the best quarterback in the league. So I think that's an interesting there. We moved to quarterback 6 here, where you have Jaden Daniels and I have Baker Mayfield. I have Baker Mayfield here a little bit lower than Daniels, but I think the way that Baker Mayfield played in 2024, by far, obviously his best in his career. And if you look at it in points per game, he was tied with Joe Burrow in points per game. He was absolutely dialing up. He runs a little bit more than Joe Burrow does. Not that he is a running quarterback, but he offers a little bit more scramble ability that we saw last year. And he just seems like a leader, a guy that people want to play around. I know the years in Cleveland and the Carolina were really dim and dull, and I know I was not a fan. But now in Tampa Bay, with the weapons he has, Mike Evans, drafted Emeka Egbuka, Jalen McMillan really showed out last year, and then I know returning Chris Godwin. I think he's in line for another solid season.
Yeah, Justin, honestly, I didn't put Baker Mayfield in my list, I don't think. And it's not to talk down on Baker. I kind of want him to prove it one more time. I wouldn't say I'm not sold on Baker Mayfield. I would just say he's very matchup proof, in my opinion. He does, looking at his schedule, he starts off week 1 at Atlanta, which I like the matchup. Then he goes to my Texans, which could be good. He has some games along the year that I'm not sold on if he can have a great year. Like he goes week 11 to Buffalo. He does go back to Los Angeles week 12. And it's like some of these games, I just feel like he'll have stinkers. I don't know why. But hey, not to ignore that he does have a really sick supporting cast. He has 2 really good. But yeah, Justin, I even think that Kate Otten is due for somewhat of a bounce back here. I remember like the first 8 weeks, Justin, he was doing really good, and then something along the way, he just went, like he just disappeared. He was only getting you like 2 or 3 catches for the rest of the last 10 games of the year. I know he has a little bit of a hamstring issue going on right now. Don't think it will hinder during the year. But I feel like if Cade Otton can have a really good year, maybe 1,000 yards, maybe like 6 touchdowns. I know it's tough to get a lot of these mouths fed. I think that'll help Baker Mayfield's status as a top fantasy quarterback there. If they can, give Bucky some catches and Mike Evans, old man Mike, it's another 1,000-yard year. Jalen McMillan pops up. I do like Emeka Egbuka. And so I do understand why you have Baker Mayfield at 6. For me, Justin, I've never been the biggest Baker Mayfield guy. So if he can prove it to me for a second year in the row, I will be bought in. But for now, I'll keep him off the list. Maybe that'll give him some motivation.
No, and I think the negatives that you can have for Baker Mayfield, which there are negatives, is he loses Liam Cohen, a guy who now a head coach in Jacksonville. So some team wanted him. Jacksonville wanted him. He's a great offensive mind. So Baker loses that for a second straight year. Obviously, he had Dave Canales calling the plays. Dave Canales leaves. Now Liam Cohen leaves. Now you have a promoted his last name is Grizzard. He was there last year. But there's a possibility that they take a step back there. And the amount of just efficiency he had, he was throwing he threw 40 touchdowns last year, I believe. Like he was up there, or at least in the 30s. So he scored much higher than expected. Expect that maybe to come down a little. But last year, points per game, third for quarterback. So even if he drops a little bit, I think still quarterback 6 is not a bad spot for him. We'll move to quarterback 7, where I have Patrick Mahomes. We talked about him already. Well, I'll throw it to you. What are your thoughts with Caleb Williams up here at 7?
Justin, I love Caleb Williams this year. I mean, look, I want to talk about his ending of his year last year because to start off 2024, it looked a bit bleak, but he was able to have some great games. And not to mention, Justin, this is an important thing. He was able to lead a victory at Lambeau Field against the Green Bay Packers. I think they were on an 8-year losing streak. And for me, in my mind, that kind of told me, like, okay, this is the start of something new in Chicago. Not to mention, they were 4-2 until that fail Mary by Jaden Daniels there in Washington. If they would have won that, they would have been 5-2, and maybe that would have given them some momentum throughout the year there, Justin. But looking at Caleb Williams' stats last year, I think they're really impressive. He made a somewhat of a connection with DJ Moore. Then I think Roma Dunze is kind of like in the category in some ways as Jason. I know Jason is a little bit is much superior, but I do think that Roma Dunze can have a similar, JSN year. And I feel like 3,000 yards last year, 3,500 yards for Caleb Williams, and an offense that had Eberflus. Not to mention that, maybe he could have had better stats if they had that win in Detroit. Remember, you and I were together watching that game on Thanksgiving. We're like, oh, okay, they're going to kick a field goal. They're going to kick a field goal. And that, for me, pretty much told me everything I need to know about this Bears offense. That if it wasn't for Eberflus being there, maybe Caleb Williams would have been a QB1 our year, Justin, all right? But going into this year, right, they don't have Keenan Allen there. Keenan Allen's currently a free agent. But they do have DJ Moore, Roma Dunze. They drafted Luther Burden, Amadi Zacchaeus, who's really good with Washington last year. Devin Duvernay, a former Longhorn who I'm familiar with. And then I love their tight ends, Justin. Cole Kmet, who's been solid in the past couple years. Then they drafted Colston Loveland, who I was watching highlights a few weeks ago. Thought he was really good. Roshan Johnson in the running back room, along with DeAndre Swift. And then they got Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson is like the key here. Not to mention, they got some leadership there in the quarterback room with Case Keenum. And so I feel like Case Keenum's a guy that threw like 5,000 yards for my Cougars many, many years ago. I think it was like 2011 or whatever. And so I feel like he's got all the ingredients. Caleb Williams has all the ingredients to throw for 4,000 yards, 35 plus touchdowns. He might turn over the ball. Yeah, he'll have 12, 13 picks. But Justin, I want you to really, real quick, look at his schedule. Week 1, Minnesota. Week 2, Detroit. Week 3, I mean, it's beautiful. He's got Dallas. He's got Las Vegas week 4. They get to bye week, but then he goes to Washington week 5, week 6, where that same time last year, he lost in that devastating loss. He gets the Saints. He gets Baltimore. That could be a shootout. And so, Justin, I love it. I love it so much. Week 16 and 17, those playoff weeks, he's got Green Bay and he's got the 49ers. So I just want you to know that at that point in time, they could be in the run and that tough division when you got Minnesota, Green Bay, and Detroit. Justin, I love Caleb Williams this year. He's got the arm. If he can be 2023 Heisman USC Caleb Williams with that, receiving core, that'd be great. Who knows? Maybe along the middle of the year, they bring back Keenan Allen. Who knows? Who knows if Keenan Allen gets signed by the Chargers? He did mention that he only wants to be in Chicago or Los Angeles. So if they can bring him back, I don't know if they have the cap space for it, but I do think that Caleb Williams will be a top 5 QB. He will have a top 5 finish by the end of the year.
I love it. I think Caleb Williams is an absolute stud. You have him higher than most. I don't have him this high, but honestly, you're making me want to go up that way because there's a lot of things going in the right direction for Caleb Williams. For one, he was the quarterback 16 last year, kind of yuck. But over the last 14 games, he was the quarterback 13. His ADP right now is quarterback 14. So he's already being drafted lower than kind of where most of his season was it was a high end quarterback 2. He's being drafted in kind of that same range, but I expect major improvements. You have DJ Moore, who's always been solid. Roma Dunze stepping into year 2. You're right. They draft Luther Burden. They draft Colston Loveland, already joining a Cole Kmet offense, and they've improved their offensive line tremendously. Joe Tooney. They brought in Drew Dahlman. They brought in Jonah Jackson. They brought in 3 good veterans into this room. Now, Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams, there's been some growing pains thus far in camp. With Ben Johnson just trying to implement a whole new system. I wouldn't be too discouraged by it if you're getting any reports like that. because there have been some kind of negatives, but you're looking at Caleb Williams. He's the number 1 pick last year for a reason. He was phenomenal at USC. He was coming into the league as kind of one of the best prospects since Andrew Luck in the draft. So he has the pedigree of doing it in college. Last year was bad, but what a worse situation could you get? You had Eberflus, who sucks, and you had Shane Waldron be his OC and get fired mid-season. Then you have an offensive line that was arguably the worst in the league because he got sacked 68 times in 2024, which was 16 more than the next quarterback, which was CJ Stroud. And so everybody's clowning on how bad CJ Stroud's offensive line was last year. Caleb Williams got sacked 16 more times than that. So I agree. It's all green, all up for Caleb Williams. You do have him higher than the rest, so I'm really excited to see if he can really take that absolute breakout, because if he jumps to this area, then I think just about all Chicago Bears will be values at where they're going. Because to me, the Bears, and maybe you could argue the Jaguars, are the hardest 2 teams to kind of cipher through, because I think Caleb Williams and Chicago are either going to be the talk of the NFL in a positive way or the talk of the NFL in a disappointing way. So there, I think he is boom bust, but I like what you have here for it. And we'll move to 8 here, where we are back to being aligned in our predictions here, and we have Dak Prescott as our 8th best quarterback here. If you look at it, yes, in 10 seasons, I think he's his 10th season, or going to be his 10th season in the NFL. He's had 3 to 4 injuries that have ruined his season. But in the 6 seasons that he's not injured, he's a top 5, top 6 quarterback. Like, he is an absolute beast when he is on the field. And what happens? They add George Pickens to the offense. I think the offensive scheme is going to be similar as it was in the past, because you had Schottenheimer, who was the OC last year. I know Mike McCarthy was calling plays, but I think Schottenheimer is going to call somewhat of a similar offense. And I think the players really like Brian Schottenheimer. I mean, he has been getting rave reviews from players. He just seems like he has that vibe that maybe McCarthy missed, maybe even Jason Garrett missed. So I expect Dak to step right back into quarterback 1 territory here. The only thing that sucks is the offensive line in the last week. This is all pretty new news, but Rob Jones, newly picked free agent for the offensive line, he fractured part of his neck and is going to be out the next 2 to 3 months. Then you have Tyler Guyton, 2024 first-round pick, was looked at to have torn his ACL. He did not, but he's going to miss near 2 months. So the beginning of the season could be rough with the offensive line, but with how bad this rushing attack looks to be, Dak's going to have to throw the rock a ton of times. And you have CeeDee Lamb, you have George Pickens, you have newly extended Jake Ferguson. Can't get much better than that. So I do like Dak a lot.
Yeah, Justin, I agree. I just think that Schottenheimer is a little bit of a questionable hire for me, in my opinion. I would have liked him a little bit more aggressive. Um, but hey, if he was there last year with Mike McCarthy, maybe he's learned some things from Mike McCarthy. Historically, Mike McCarthy, when he was in Green Bay, he hardly ever ran the ball. I remember one year he turned Tom Montgomery, who was a wide receiver, into a running back. Ditched Eddie Lacy, who was good at the University of Alabama. Ditched James Starks, who was one of their running backs in their only Super Bowl in the Aaron Rodgers era. And I feel like, hopefully he's able to take a book, pages out of that book, because, hey, if they're pass, and I love this for Dak Prescott. Looking at their schedule, Justin, they start off week 1 at Philadelphia. I don't know if I like that matchup against the champs. I mean, that front 7 against that hurt offensive line with all those injuries you just mentioned. And then week 2, they have a home game against the Giants. So maybe week 3, they go to Chicago, which, I don't know, sometimes it's rough playing at Soldier Field. And then week 4, Justin, you get your nemesis and the Green Bay Packers. You go to New York week 5 to play the Jets. You play Carolina week 6. In week 8, you go to Denver. So a little bit shaky there, Justin. I think if you can hold on to Dak Prescott enough and you make the playoffs, maybe he's a quarterback that's good in the second half of the season there. But yes, you can't deny the greatness of CeeDee Lamb, which I love what he said last week at practice. Like, hey, man, when I got a full season, I got Dak Prescott. You can see what I can do. And that's a guy that I'm actually looking to draft this year, Justin, CeeDee Lamb. He's going to get a ton of targets. But I do love George Pickens. I love Jalen Tolbert. I think Jake Ferguson has a bounce back year. Turpin is still there. Maybe he can prove himself one last time. I think he's on his last chance with the Cowboys. They got Jonathan Mingo, who was a former Panther, I believe. And so I feel like, yes, that running game, though, Justin, I'm just not bought in. So I think Dak Prescott is perfect for number 8 there, Justin. He's got the targets. He's got the weapons. His O-line is a little hurt. Now, his Coaching staff is a little unknown, but I do think that they'll make it work.
Yeah, and I think the one more positive to throw into it is how bad I think this defense is going to be this year. I think it will take a step backwards, and that only means that the offense is going to have to throw the rock more shootout potential in these games. But I understand the doubts, and also Dak used to be known as this really solid rushing quarterback, but since these injuries, especially now last year with the torn hamstring, I don't see him running much. So he's going to have to offer through the air like Joe Burrow, but Joe Burrow's offense is 10 steps ahead of what the Cowboys' offense is, and that's why we do have him at 8. But we'll move to 9 here, where we both have 2 different quarterbacks. Both we haven't mentioned yet. I'll let you start with Jared Goff with all the changes that have happened in Detroit.
Yeah, Justin, I do think that the Lions, instead of them being a first seed, they could maybe be a third seed. But I do like them this year. Now, how hungry are they? I mean, like, they kind of became the best team in the league last year, especially in the NFC. They're one of the best offenses. Like, do they still have that hunger? Like, I love Dan Campbell, and he can be a great coach, a great motivator. But without these coordinators that they lost this year, Justin, how great can they be? And looking at the roster here, it's still kind of the same, right? You still got Gibbs and Montgomery as your backfield. And then you got, Monroe, Jameson Williams, which I think Jameson Williams is going to have a really good year there. You got Tim Patrick, who's really good in Denver. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Tim Patrick's had back-to-back ACL tears when he was with Denver. I don't think he even got to play with Russell Wilson in those 2 years that Russell was there. I do think that Laporta has a bounce back year. What gets tricky, though, is how are these other guys? Like, can they get Khalif Raymond and Isaac Tesla? It's a guy on the team. Dominic Lovett. And I think that I see them making it happen. I'm just a little bit concerned with, Ben Johnson being gone. Like, who can be the next guy to step up as far as their next offensive coordinator? But nevertheless, they're there looking at their schedule. Goff has somewhat of a all right schedule. You get Green Bay at Green Bay in Lambeau week 1. He had an okay game against them last year. You get Chicago. You go to Baltimore week 3 on a Monday night. You got Cleveland at home, which could be good for Jared Goff. Week 5 is shootout at Cincinnati. And then week 6, you got Kansas City. And then week 7, Tampa. And on and on. There's some good matchups along the way there. And so, hey, I do like Jared Goff. I think it's week 8 bye. So I think he's a guy that you can rely on mid-season, middle to end. And I just feel like in this tough division, just like the way I talked about Caleb Williams and the Bears, I feel like the Lions, they're going to be in the thick of a really good division. So I feel like when you put all this together, I think Jared Goff is a perfect 9. Last year, I actually was surprised that he was like QB 13 in preseason draft rankings, which I was surprised because he had a fantastic, supporting cast. So I feel like this year it could be similar, but just a little bit of a step back. Just like one step back, but not too much of a step back, if that makes sense.
I understand your side. I feel like, though, I'm going to have to be a contrarian here in the fact that I have doubts. I have a lot of doubts, to be honest with you. The only thing I don't doubt is I do think the culture is intact with Dan Campbell at the helm, so I don't think that they're not going to be fired up. And I do love the roster. The roster not really changed, at least for the skill positions, but the loss of one of the best offensive minds in Ben Johnson is going to affect him. The loss of Aaron Glenn is important. And the loss of Frank Ragnow and Kevin Zeitler are also very important. 2 starting offensive linemen. I think that's going to be tough. And when you look at a quarterback similar to, we talked about Dak, similar to Joe Burrow, similar to a lot of just pocket passers, he's not going to offer you anything with his legs. So he has to have a great output with his arm, and I just think it's going to take a step back in 2025. Plus, historically, he is not a great outdoor quarterback, and thankfully he does play in a dome in Detroit. And last year he got bailed out because 8 of his away games, 5 of them were also in a dome, but this year it's different. 7 of those 8 away games are outdoors, so I expect that it's going to be a little bit tougher this year for Jared Goff. He did show much improvement last year, but with the devastating loss they had in the playoffs and the losses they've had this offseason, I have doubts. I'm kind of a guy that I'm not on board. I'd rather take the upside plays of guys like, I don't want to spoil it, but guys like Justin Fields, even guys like a bounce back from CJ Stroud or Jordan Love. I even like Michael Penix, and that's a very low or that's a very deep play. But even guys like Drake May and JJ McCarthy, I'm really fading Jared Goff, unfortunately. But I could eat my words because this team is a very talented team, and they have great leadership in Dan Campbell, and I think Jared Goff is also a great leader on his team. But I just think there will be a step back with all the losses they faced. For me, I have Bo Nix here, who was the quarterback 7 last year. So I'm already ranking him a little bit lower than he was last year, but wouldn't you think he's going to improve in 2025 with another year with Sean Payton, with the additions of Pat Bryant, Evan Ingram, the improvements to Marvin Mims? They just, as of today or even yesterday, have extended Cortland Sutton to a 4-year deal. And I think they've had an improved running game. And I think that's going to allow Bo Nix to continue to flourish in this offense and improve with this team. Now, the downside is he's also not a rushing quarterback. And 2, I think the last year in 2024, the Denver rushing offense was probably the worst, if not one of the worst in the league. This year, I think with the additions of J.K. Dobbins and R.J. Harvey, I think that they're going to rely on running the ball a little bit more and not need Bo Nix to do as much as he did last year, bringing maybe his total attempts down. But I think as a quarterback, he will just be more efficient. And with the defense too being better, I think that they're going to be in leads more. So there is some negatives to Bo Nix, but I think Bo Nix as a player will only improve, and his weapons improved overall. So that's why I have him at 9 here.
Yeah, Justin, I have mixed feelings about because here's the thing. I think I'm kind of comparing what the Philadelphia Eagles did a few years ago. Yeah, they got Devontae Smith, and then like a year later they traded for A.J. Brown. Here it's like, yeah, y'all got Cortland Sutton, and he's great. He had a great year last year. He was really good. But I need another guy that he can throw to. And yes, Evan Ingram. Evan Ingram will be good this year. And I think he helps Bo Nix a lot. But I just need that one more wide receiver. Like if you can sign Keenan Allen, that'd be great for me. If you can sign another speedster, that'd be great for me. But nevertheless, I do like Marvin Mims there. I do like Troy Franklin, I believe is his former teammate there in Oregon. And so I know it's Sean Payton. He will make it work. But I need that guy that can be a Michael Thomas. I need that guy that can be a Marcus Colston. I need that guy that can be like a kid, like another guy that it can be there. I'm looking at their depth chart. I think Devon Bailey, I think his name is. He's listed as their wide receiver 3, and this is a guy that he did have 475 yards last year, but I need another note. I know Sean Payton can make it work, and I do like Bo Nix this year. I think he has really underrated rushing ability. He could get you 5 to 6 rushing touchdowns. I do think he has a great rushing ability. I think he has a great offensive scheme, but I just need that big name. I just need that one, because if like Cortland Sutton, let's say he misses a few games or something like that, like does Bo Nix really have a impressive supporting cast like Pat Bryant, Trent Sherfield? I don't know. I just don't really believe in his supporting cast outside of Cortland Sutton and Evan Ingram, but I'm hoping that Marvin Mims has a big year. But regardless, I do think that Bo Nix is in a really good situation overall.
You mentioned a name that is a Sean Payton great in Michael Thomas, and obviously it could be just training camp smoke, but Sean Payton has compared Pat Bryant over in training camp and OTAs to his former wide receiver Michael Thomas. That could just be blowing smoke up his butt, but I think that could mean something as a possibility for a next wide receiver. And one little last thing, the Broncos defense, kind of under the radar, one of the best offensive lines in the game. PFF has ranked them as the number 2 offensive line. So I think Bo Nix is going to have ample amounts of time to get it to his receivers this year, and that's going to help big time. I mean, that was a big reason guys like Jared Goff, too, had the best O-line last year, them and the Eagles, and Goff was able to have that time in the pocket. I think that's going to matter a lot for Bo Nix this year. Let's move to our last quarterbacks in our top 10, and we have Justin Fields and C.J. Stroud. I'll start here. I like Justin Fields in 2025 because he can run the football. I think that ability he had last year in what seems to be an underwhelming season with the Pittsburgh Steelers, in his 6 starts, he was the quarterback 6. So that rushing ability, although he might not be the best quarterback, maybe not a top 20 quarterback in this league, maybe not top 25, but with the rushing ability for fantasy football, it's going to be extra important. And then you have him rejoining his college teammate in Garrett Wilson. I can see shades of DJ Moore and him in 2023 on Chicago. This could happen this year with Garrett Wilson. They just extended Garrett Wilson. They also have Breece Hall, who's solid. The rest of their surrounding parts are not that great, but I think their O-line is improved. They have 3 first-round picks on this offensive line. So I think that's going to improve. And then if you want to take that upside swing, he has the upside to be a top 5 to 6 fantasy quarterback. And they took Detroit's passing game coordinator, Tanner Engstrand, from the Lions this offseason to become their offensive coordinator. And if he can emulate that Ben Johnson kind of offense, then this offense might be the most underrated offense in football right now. Obviously, the Jets are being kind of graded as probably a bottom 5 to 6 offense in this league. But if the Commanders were getting those same nods last year, and if the Jets, if you want to take that lottery ticket, that upside swing on a team, and they hit, you might win a fantasy championship, and you get Justin Fields in the double-digit rounds. I like Justin Fields a lot.
Yeah, Justin. I mean, look, the last time he played nearly a full season, it was 2022. He played 15 games with the Bears. He had 1,000 yards rushing, or 1,100 yards rushing, and 8 touchdowns. He had a 60. His longest run was a 67-yard rushing touchdown. That is phenomenal, there, Justin, in Chicago. Now, when obviously you mentioned who they were to get as far as coaching staff. Out of Detroit, but I love the pairing between him and Aaron Glenn. I think, Aaron Glenn is a defensive-minded coach, but I think that, I think it's going to provide some maturity for Justin Fields. And honestly, I never really understood the Justin Field hate. Like, I know during the 2024 offseason where the Bears were looking to part ways and go for Caleb Williams, which is understandable. A lot of people were just like, oh, yeah, that's a no-brainer, which I was like, man, Justin Fields is still very talented. The only thing is that toe injury that he just got surgery on. If it can be healthy and healed right in the next month or so, I have no doubt this is going to be really good for Justin Fields there. And you mentioned the depth chart there. Garrett Wilson, you got Josh Reynolds, who I believe Josh Reynolds, he was in Detroit last year, right? I want to say, was Josh? No, he was in
Denver last year,
I think it was in Denver. Okay, not in Detroit. But still, I like Josh Reynolds. He's very solid. He used to be with the Rams at one point. They had Alan Lazard there who stayed. Malachi Corley, who we liked a few off seasons ago. And they got a couple unknowns. I do like Mason Taylor. I think he's the son or the nephew of Jason Taylor, Hall of Famer of the Miami Dolphins. But Mason Taylor, tight end out of LSU, was really good at LSU this past year, Justin. They just drafted him. And his stats last year, he did only have 2 touchdowns along with 500 yards. But I think if they can use him in this offense, I think he'll be really good there. He is listed as the number 1 tight end there. They do have Jeremy Ruckert as a number 2 tight end. So we'll see. The rushing ability of Justin Fields is really good. So I really like it. I think it can help Garrett Wilson. I think 10 is really good. The rushing ability is good. He's got Garrett Wilson. He's got Lazard, Malachi Corley, Mason Taylor. But for me, Justin, I'm sorry, but I got to talk about my favorite quarterback in all of the league, in all of the world, and it is the one, C.J. Stroud from my Houston Texans. I've been able to meet him a couple times. I've been able to see him at a Rockets games. I mean, it's just like Destiny. He's been at some U of H games. I mean, it's like everywhere I go in downtown Houston, there is my guy, C.J. Stroud. And hopefully we will be in a parade one day in downtown Houston, Bayou area, and we can hold that Lombardi. But, hey, I love C.J. Stroud. I know last year was a little bit rough. But, hey, Justin, in his first 2 years in the league, he's won the division. He's won a playoff game. And, yes, he had to go to Baltimore in year 1 in the playoffs. Last year we had to go to, Kansas City. And these are 2 teams that have 2 of the best, the past 2, a couple of MVPs, right? Besides Josh Allen. But still, he's still working his way up to be that top QB, and I think he can, Justin. I just think one thing with C.J. Stroud, he's not a runner, so a lot of defenses are already anticipating the pass. So I feel like C.J. Stroud's never really been a runner, even at the University of Ohio State. And I just feel like, this year things can change, but I don't think they're going to go that route. We do have a new offensive coordinator. I do like our 2 wide receivers we drafted in Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel. I like Christian Kirk. He was really good last year in Jacksonville until he got hurt and he was put on IR. We're not sure if Tank Dell's going to come back, but I do like John Mechie. I do like Dalton Schultz. Brevin Jordan is healthy. He's back. They got Cade Stover, his former teammate at Ohio State. I think our wide receiving crew is a little bit deep there. I know Joe Mixon might miss the first couple weeks, but hey, we got Nick Chubb, who's been here before. I know he's coming off an injury himself, but we got Damian Pierce, Woody Marks. We got a couple other guys we drafted. So we'll see how this offense will be put together. I think, in my opinion, it's going to be somewhat of a odd start. Like week 1 at Los Angeles, I think he could have a good game. We have a Monday night against Tampa Bay. We go week 3 to Jacksonville, week 4 Tennessee, and then we have week 5 at Baltimore before we get a week 6 bye with C.J. Stroud. His championship weeks, he's got, first round of the playoffs, he's got Arizona. And in the semifinals, he's home with the Raiders. And the championship week, he's at the Chargers. So not bad of a playoff schedule, in my opinion, Justin. I think things will be intact there. I think Joe Mixon will be back. I think this offense will be rolling. Last year, he was 20 touchdowns to 12 picks. I'm gonna like him going 32 to 11, and I think he does get 4,000 yards passing. I love C.J. Stroud. He's my favorite player in the league. I have to put him at number 10. I can't underestimate his accuracy, and he is a winner.
I love everything you said. I do expect a big bounce back year for CJ Stroud this season. I mean, last year obviously was tough, but they still win the division. They still win a playoff game. But fantasy-wise, he was not good for your fantasy teams.
Yeah.
But he had Nico miss a handful of games. He had Tank Dell miss, half the season. He had Stephon Diggs miss half the season. So he had a lot of losses there in the receiver room. And then, yes, the O-line was really bad. And this year projects to be also a not great O-line. But I think with the new scheme of Nick Caley, I think he will be improved to what we saw from Bobby Slowick last year. So I think it's not always just the players you put in the positions, but it's how you scheme them up. And I think Nick Caley will do a really good job of that this year. So I expect the O-line to go from being literally dead last in the league to probably 22nd or 23rd, which will improve CJ Stroud's accuracy, his ability to stay in a clean pocket. And I do think, even though obviously last year was a lot of shine on this wide receiver room with, Nico and Tank and Stephon Diggs and that excitement there, this is a little less shine, but because, two rookies and then Christian Kirk, who may be past his prime, but I think they're going to play better. I think that Higgins and Noel, obviously rookies, are going to bring some fresh light into this receiver room, as well as just, nobody really knows their output yet, and I think that they're going to exceed expectations. And then I still think Christian Kirk is a very solid wide receiver. So I agree. I think C.J. Stroud is going to be a much better quarterback this year. I don't have him as high as 10, but I do have him much higher than 18, which is where he finished last year. But yeah, Dween Nation, those are our top 10. Genoa, real quick, I want to throw to you, if you had one honorable mention, one 11th spot quarterback, real quick, who would you throw in there?
Jordan Love, Justin. I'm glad you asked me that. I was going to probably throw that in. I love Jordan Love. We talked about it in last episode with the training camp battles. You got Matt Golden, Romeo Dobbs, Tucker Kraft, Jaden Reed. I can go on and on and on. You got Josh Jacobs in the backfield. I do like Jordan Love to have a bounce back year there, Justin. He did have 3,000 yards, almost 4,000 yards passing, 25 to 11 touchdown to interception rating. So I think that it'll be better. And yeah, who's yours?
I have Caleb Williams as my 11th quarterback.
Okay.
But since we talked about him, I'll throw in one more guy that I really like, and it's a guy currently going at ADP. What is this? Quarterback 23, but a guy who I just maybe I just want to throw him in there even more, and it is Michael Penix Jr.
Okay.
I think this year, obviously the last 3 games, he was the best quarterback in football and fantasy. He was throwing at a crazy rate, even in an offense with Bijan Robinson. But if you look at this offense, you still have a top 5 to 8 offensive line in the league. You have another year of Zach Robinson, a full offseason as Penix as the starter, Drake London, Darnell Mooney, even Kyle Pitts is getting some rave reviews at camp. And then you have Bijan Robinson. And if you look at it real quick, I know we are running out of time here with the amount of time we've had on this, but to start his season, he plays some of the worst passing defenses in the league. Tampa Bay, Minnesota, Carolina, Washington, bye week, Buffalo, San Francisco, and Miami. Those are all bottom 15 passing defenses. So I expect Penix to throw a lot. I know Bijan will be – I still expect Bijan to be top 2, top 3 RB in the league in fantasy. But I think Penix is a guy going absolutely under the radar right now. Not drafted in a lot of leagues, but deserves some eyeballs. But anyways, Dween Nation, those are our top 10 plus 1 or 2 quarterbacks for the 2025 season. Stay tuned, though, because we got tight ends on the roll. We got wide receivers. We got running backs. And a lot more content. This, we're heading into August, which is going to be the biggest month of content we have, I'd say, before the season obviously starts, and then we're going to be right in the thick of it. But you need to, we want you guys to listen to us. Drop your comments, drop your likes, drop your, follows. We would love to continue to build Dween Sports and help you guys win fantasy football championships, because that's what we're here for at the center of it all. But thank you guys for listening, and Genoa, send us out.
Yo, Dween Nation, this was our top 10 QBs of the fantasy season. Be sure to stay for our running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. as it all leads into week 1 as the fantasy season kicks off. Happy draft season to everybody there. It's like a mini Christmas here in July and early August. Thank you guys for watching. We love y'all. And as always, peace.